Welcome to Eva in Canada. My name is Eva, and I'm happy to join you today to discuss how we were able to rent our first house in Canada. So we moved to Canada. Actually, I moved to Canada around December 2020. I left my country, Nigeria, on Christmas Day, and then arrived in Canada the day after Christmas, which we call Boxing Day. But as I've addressed in my previous video, I got a job as a software engineer. And that job, it took a while, it took some time. But after getting that job, I know that I was going to come to Canada. So I started to do my research. Imagine the joy, always that, when the dream that you've had since 10 years old, you finally achieved that dream and you've applied for the visa. You are expecting the visa quick because the visa is supposed to take relatively a short time. And so I started doing some research. Today in this video, I'm going to discuss, I have some notes before me here, so I'm going to be referring to those notes. So we're going to discuss, before arriving in Canada, what happened after I got a job, what different ways did I research about Canada, what places did I want to rent, how I went about, even before I arrived in Canada, how I went about connecting myself with different people, taking a look at my desire, what I wanted in a house, and how I wanted to get a place that is comfortable for me and for the work I'll be doing. Excuse me. After that, we're going to be discussing what happened when we arrived in Canada, which was in the middle of COVID. And then we are going to discuss the renting process and what is required for you to be able to rent a house in Canada. So these are all we'll be talking about today. And there are certain tricks, or not tricks really, there are certain things you need to understand about housing in Canada generally, and how to ensure that you get the right type of house you need, even when you've never been to Canada, and knowing that Canada is different from where you're coming from. There are different laws, there are different laws, there are different ways of doing things. So without further ado, let's get into it. So like I said before, we've gotten the job in 2019. We applied for the visa. When I say we, I mean me, my spouse, and my children. So we've applied for the visa and we were waiting for the visa. The visa was supposed to take at most 3 months. But unfortunately, because of COVID happened in the middle of that, and that happened in March 2020. And so because of that, our visa was quite delayed. So what I started doing was that the first thing I did was to try and figure out the type of house or the type of houses that are available in Canada, the process for renting a house in Canada, what was required, what what I needed to have to ensure I got the type of house I wanted. So how did I go about this research? The first thing I did was I watched several videos about Canada. I knew I was going to Toronto, so my focus was really on Toronto. So I started watching different videos. There were actually people that walk across Toronto, different areas of Toronto, and they show it on YouTube. They just walk from street to street, show you the houses, tell you about the history of the streets. I will link some channels here or in the description. You can check out those channels. So in the joy, I am this kind of person that I want to see the different areas. I want to choose where to live. I want to see what is available out there. So I started watching them. I started seeing the different places they go to. Some went to North York, some went to the waterfront, some went to Eglinton, different areas of Toronto. And I fell in love with the waterfront area of Toronto. So I knew that if I had the opportunity to choose where I wanted to live within the budget I had, I would choose waterfront. So those were the different types of video. I remember there's a guy called Johnny Stride. Johnny Stride was one of my favorite video a creator that walks around Toronto talking about Toronto, because he really knew the history of these places, and he discussed the history. He tells you about the building, who lived here when, 2015, what happened in 2015, what happened in 1950 something. He was quite knowledgeable, and I really appreciated that about this creator. So I watched most of his video. I went to his live session, and he mentioned different things that were of interest to me. Many of them I can't remember now, but I know from those videos I was able to do further research and realize that there are different requirements when renting houses in Canada. So apart from the videos I watched, I also used Google Street View. So I've collected a list of areas and streets I was interested in, based on my criteria and based on what I've seen from these creators' videos. So I went to Google Street View, and I started checking out different houses on Google Street View, Google Maps Street View. So the good thing about Google Maps Street View is that you can actually enter an address of a house, and then you are able to look at the house, and at least it gives you the kind of feeling that the kind of familiarity, and then you are able to read the history of those types of places. So I had a short list of where I wanted to stay. I had a short list of places I wanted to visit. I had a short list of restaurants and bars that I wanted to eat in or drink at. But remember I said this, if I had a choice and if any houses were within my budget, I would prefer the riverfront. So, but what was within my budget? How could I check, or how could I find out whether these areas that are shortlisted were actually within my budget? So there's a website called rental.ca or Kijiji, and there's another one called Kijiji.ca. So what I did was I went to this website, and all those addresses that I've collected, all those areas I've collected, especially around the waterfront, I entered them into the rental.ca and Kijiji.ca. I started checking the amenities. I started checking the transport system. I started checking different things And then I also check the budget for those houses. I realized that while we were in the pandemic, it was actually very affordable to live in those areas. So it was well within my budget. That was the good thing. I also went on Facebook. I joined some Toronto-based groups, especially when it comes to where people advertised that they have houses to rent. I spoke to different people, and that's where I realized that renting an apartment or a condo is different from renting a house. I really didn't want to rent a house because, like I said, by then I have some specific picture of the kind of house I want, or the kind of place I wanted to stay. And I didn't want to stay in an apartment. I didn't want to stay in a house. I didn't want to stay in a townhouse. I wanted to stay in a condo. So from the research I've done, I wanted to stay in a condo that was above, I want 30th floor. So I wanted to stay anywhere from the 30th floor to 68th floor. By the way, when I started all this research, I was afraid of heights, right? I get vertigo when I am high enough. I'm in a tall building. But it was crazy if you think about it, that I chose to look for a condo that was above the 30th floor. Yeah, I was afraid of height, but at the same time, I wanted to enjoy being able to look across the water, being able to live in that tall environment. See, let's be frank, living in a condo at that height is quite beautiful. It is beautiful. So that was one of my desires, of my requirements. Also, one of the requirements was that I wasn't looking for a one bedroom. I was looking for a one bedroom plus den, because I will be working from home. And something that I've learned is that having a separate office was good. It's always good for your mental health. Being able to get up in the morning, do your morning constitutionals, prepare for work. Even though you are not going outside of your building, but you are going to a separate office within your building, it puts you in the right state of mind and prepares you for your work. So I actually wanted a place where I could sleep, but at the same time I also wanted a place where a separate place to work. So I was looking for a one bedroom plus den. I was also looking for a place that included utility, hydro, gas, whatever you name it. Oh, by the way, in Toronto, hydro refers to electricity and water. So when you say hydro, you're not just talking about water, you are talking about electricity and water. So when you hear me say hydro, I'm referring to electricity and water. So I wanted a place that was close to the waterfront, and like I've mentioned before, I wanted a place that would fit into my budget. So one thing I discovered is that to rent a house in Canada, you need credit history. Most landlords will not rent you a house unless you have a solid credit history. And that becomes a problem for a lot of immigrants who has never lived in Canada, by the way, who are coming to Canada for the very first time, needing credit history to rent a house. But you need a house. You need to live in Canada to build credit history, but you need credit history to be able to live in Canada. So it was a chicken and egg problem, which comes first. So in this video, I want to tell you how I was able to overcome those limitations, because I never lived in Canada. I did not have any credit history. So, but I needed to rent a house. So there are various ways you can overcome that limitation, and stick around. I will tell you how I was able to overcome those limitations. So, before I moved to Canada, on those Facebook group that I talked about, I was able to connect myself with an agent that I will forever be grateful to for making my dream come true. Now, I'll get to that part, but I connected with her while many people did not want to work with me because I was still in my country, right? I had not even booked my flights, but I knew exactly around the time I wanted to move to Canada. She was willing to work with me. She was willing to go out of her way to make sure I was able to get a house. She gave me some very solid advice, and I worked with her from the beginning to the end, and she represented my interests so well that till today, I'm very grateful to her. She's no longer an agent. She's moved forward in her career, but she actually made my dream come true. I will link her. I'm not sure I should link her information here, but I will ask her before I do that. So I connected myself with the agent. I gave her the criteria and what I was looking for, and I gave her the anticipated date I was moving to Canada, and then she was willing to go to work. She started by before she go out, she will send me a message that a WhatsApp message that she was going out to start looking for a house. And then she will go to different places, take video of those different places, or we do a live video call, take several images. She will show me around to see if I like the places. In the first week that she did that, she was able to show me 4 different condos that were within my budget and at the same time met my criteria. So 2 of those condos were outside the river waterfront, because I had some secondary areas I was willing to consider, but my priority was in the waterfront. But the 2 that were in fact, they were across the waterfront, which I was very happy with. So she spoke to the landlord of the place. One of those condos was on the 38th floor. I remember I told you anything from the 30th floor I wanted anything from the 30th floor. But the other condo she showed me that I fell in love with was on the 58th floor. It was extremely beautiful. The condo was wonderful. It was on the waterfront, and you could look out of your condo in the morning and you are seeing the entire expanse of Toronto, or within the waterfront area of Toronto. It was just across the what's this building called again? The CN Tower. Just if you come down from the elevator, walk 2 minutes, you are the base of the CN Tower. And I'll tell you the truth, I fell in love with that beauty, and I fell in love with the condo itself. And it was within my budget. So did I get that condo? Unfortunately not. I did not. And the reason why I did not get that condo was because I was still in my country. I had not. I know when I was arriving in Canada, I had booked my flights, but the landlord was not willing to wait for me to come to Canada, and he had issue with the fact that I did not have a credit history. So remember this, credit history is very important. But there are ways to take care of that, and I will discuss them in the later part of this video. So it was a huge disappointment. I really like that building. I like the way the bedroom was set up, the living room was set up, the den was set up. I had this huge balcony and a huge window that you could see up to Toronto Village from. I knew if I was in that condo, the 58th floor of that condo, and I wake up in the morning, I was going to get inspired to achieve all the dreams I came to Canada with. Unfortunately, the landlord was not willing to work with me. The landlord was not willing to wait. And say, let's be frank, I do not blame the landlord. It was in the pandemic. It was a renter's market. So any landlord could not risk waiting when there was somebody else that was willing to pay right now. So kudos to him that he took that decision to rent it to somebody else. I would not blame him. If I was in his place, I think that's exactly what I would do too. So my agent didn't stop. She continued to look at other houses. Now, remember I said I like the layout of the house, the layout of the condo, how it was laid out, the balcony and all that. So what I did after that huge disappointment was that I went to Kijiji or .ca or renter.ca, and I started researching if there were any other available condos within that same building. It was close to the waterfront, it was close to CN Tower. I know it was going to be, living there was going to be fun. Were there other condo available within the same building above the 30th floor? There were several. But I saw several, but my agents actually advised me to wait till I actually get to Canada before we started making offers, because what we've already been disappointed, and we did not want to go through that disappointment anymore. So that's what happened. That's what we did. I waited, and like I said, on Christmas Day, I left my country, I left my spouse and my children back, because one of my daughter, my wife gave birth while we were waiting for our visa. So she needed to wait so we could apply for a new visa for our daughter. So the way it would work now is that when I arrive at Canada, I will have to send her a letter of invitation, my daughter a letter of invitation for her to be able to join me. So the complicated process, but we got it done. We got it done, and they are all here in Canada with me. So I arrived the next day. I took a flight from my country, Lagos. It was a 24-hour flight, and then I arrived in the middle of COVID, quarantine everywhere. I arrived a day after Christmas. The snow was the first thing I saw. Man, I love snow. Winter is hands down my favorite time of the year. I love winter. So yeah, one of my bucket list of adventure is actually to go spend 6 months in Nunavut, right? To go do research, just go spend 6 months there, writing code, doing robotics, just living there, existing and living life. Yes, and I want to do that in the middle of winter. I love winter. That's by the way. So, it was during quarantine. I was still working with this. Now that I've arrived in Canada, it was easier to actually work with the agents. She was able to contact multiple landlords. And then we found several condos within that. Remember the building that had the 58th floor condo? We were able to find several condos that were still available within that building. COVID has made it such that a lot of people left Toronto, people moved out of Toronto, they were working remotely. So there were a lot of available properties there. So it was the renters market. So my agent once again went to see those condos, and then we actually chose one, and the one we chose was on the 45th floor of that same building. The same layout. Unfortunately, there was no balcony, but there was this huge ass window that you could see out of, and it was facing the rivers, and it was on the 40th. Did I say it was on the 45th floor? I loved it. So we made an offer on the house, and the issue of credit score, a credit history came up. I did promise to tell you several ways to overcome the issue of credit history. I love this house. I didn't want to miss it. So when it came to credit history, I didn't have credit history, and the house was almost falling through my hands again. And then I made the landlord an offer he could not refuse. When I made him that offer he could not refuse, he could not refuse it. So I was able to get the house, and then my quarantine was till around January 15th. I think, I can't remember the specific date. So I got the key from the agent on the day I left quarantine. I went to the house, and that was the first place I went to outside the Airbnb where I quarantined. That was the very first place I took an Uber to, and took an elevator. Man, let me tell you something. If you've entered an elevator before, you know you feel that level of weightlessness just for some few milliseconds or microseconds. It is worse when you are going to a higher floor. You feel it, and then when you keep going to a higher floor, it doubles, it keeps increasing, because right now, as you move right upwards, the pressure, atmospheric pressure is reducing, and the effect of gravity is actually reducing because you are moving against gravity. The effect is reducing. So I had this pit at the bottom of my stomach from that effect, but once I stepped into the condo, I knew I was home. I knew whatever bargain I did, whatever I needed to do, anything I did to make it to that point in time, I've done something right in my life. Now, from the age of 10, I've been dreaming of coming to Canada. I've arrived in Canada about 2 weeks ago. But for the very first time, I felt that this condo actually answered my soul, actually reassured my spirit that yes, the dream you've been pursuing since you were 10 years old, you finally achieved it. And that dream was coming to Canada. So that was it. I started life on the 45th floor. Before I even came to the house for the very first time, I've ordered furnitures from Wayfair, from Amazon, from different places. And the furniture arrived by the time I was ready to move in. So, we can talk about that in another video, but I just wanted to tell you how we're able to move to Canada without others get a house, a condo without credit history. Now, if you do not have credit history, there are 3 things that you could do to reduce the impact of lack of credit history, or to eliminate the impact of lack of credit history. Number 1 is you could get a guarantor. If you have a guarantor in Canada that's a permanent resident or a citizen of Canada who is willing to guarantee you, landlords are more likely to rent to you in that circumstances. But the problem is, how do you find a guarantor? You're right. Whatever means that you came to Canada with, it could be through work permit, through permanent residence, or even through schooling. It is difficult to get a guarantor, especially if you don't have relatives in Canada. So for me, that was not an option because I didn't have any friends in Canada, didn't have any relatives in Canada. I had nobody in Canada. And your agent is not allowed to be your guarantor. That's against the code of ethics for real estate agents. She can't be your guarantor. So, secondly, another thing you could do is have a very good job. If you have a very good job with a very good salary, then you could take a letter from your employer that kind of says an attestation letter that says this person works with us, this is how much is paid, and he will be able to cover his rent. That's another way to do that. So if you can get a letter that shows that you have a job and how much you'll be getting from your job. So, and if you have a very good job like that, it's going to pave the way for you, with your landlord, to be able to easily get a house. So, or a condo, or an apartment, or whatever you are going for. So, having a very good job with a good paying salary and an attestation letter from your workplace is another way that helps with that. I was able to provide a letter, which for me helped. But so I told you, I offered the landlord, I gave the landlord an offer he could not refuse. Yeah, when I gave him my attestation letter, he was already very happy with that. Then I made him an offer. Before now, I knew it was going, while in my country, I knew it was going to be very tough getting a house. So I have put together a lot of money, and that was the money I offered the landlord. Instead of paying what they call first and last, which is the first month and the last month. Now let me explain that. When you're paying rent in Canada, you are expected to pay the first month and then the last month. The last month is for when you give the landlord a notice that you're leaving, that last month is supposed to pay for the last month of your rent. And the thing is that when you give the landlord that last month, the landlord is supposed to pay you, supposed to collect interest. That they're supposed to, let me put it this way. You are supposed to get interest from the landlord on that money, because it's a transaction. If you put it in the bank, you wouldn't get interest. So I offered the landlord first and last month plus an additional, I think then it was 3 months of rent. So instead of paying for 2 months, I paid, I think 5 to 6 months of rent. And then I added that instead of paying, I added an additional $50 to what we previously agreed, just for his convenience. So instead of paying something like $2,000 every month, I was now paying $2,050, just so he can't refuse my offer. I had some competitors for that specific house, but all these 3 things put together knocked them out of the running, and I was able to get that house. So let me reiterate: you could get a guarantor, you could get an attestation letter from your bank, or you can offer your landlord more than the required 2 months of rent, first and last month. So that's what I did, and that's how I was able to rent my dream a condo for the very first time without credit history. Now I lived in that house for about a year. My spouse and my children joined me. It was very cramped. Later parts of that year, it was very cramped. It was very difficult to enjoy the place, but we did have fun. And after a year, we bought our own house. But that's another story. I am going to put out a video soon about how we bought a house as temporary residents, not permanent residents, as temporary residents in Canada within 1 year. So if you've not subscribed, please subscribe. If this video has been of value to you, please like this video, share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.